Remember when Elon Musk released the internal emails from Twitter, the Twitter files? Well, I've talked to enough people, 4 people now, who tell me to be ready for what's called the GEC files. This refers to the Global Engagement Center. Now, this started at the State Department with bipartisan support. It was Republican Senator Rob Portman from Ohio, now retired, and Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, who got together and made the GEC happen. And essentially, it was tasked with exposing foreign influence operations, primarily from Russia, as well as China and Iran. But then it got caught in the crosshairs of conservatives because it also funded various programs and initiatives. And some of those initiatives later went on to criticize conservative media outlets here in the United States. Those media outlets then said that that hurt their revenue and that hurt their circulation, that hurt their credibility to be accused of spreading disinformation themselves. Now, back in April, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he called the GEC, quote unquote, government sponsored censorship that was targeting specific Americans. He said the best way to counter disinformation was through free speech. And he vowed to document what happened at the GEC, saying that people who were harmed deserved to know, to show if the State Department was involved in these specific Americans being deplatformed from social media. Now, a U.S. Court of Appeals said that they found no evidence of that. This included conservative judges. But ultimately, the GEC, whose name changed, was demolished this year. This was before the wide-scale reductions in force that I have reported on that occurred this summer. Now, 4 State Department officials, formers, I should say, tell me that this internal FOIA process has been underway to see what the GEC was up to. Nobody's working there now, so they're not having the easiest time finding these things. But they're looking for keywords like Pepe the Frog and the names of American influencers who might have been targeted, allegedly. They're also looking for the names of American journalists who have spoken negatively about the Trump administration. And these officials have real concerns around redactions, essentially not just ceding ground to the Russians and the Chinese, who they say are ramping up disinformation operations, but the fact that there could be names that are not redacted from these files, meaning that people who worked in media literacy and educating others on how to spot disinformation, pro-democracy activities in countries where there are authoritarian leaders, that they could be essentially, their identities could be made public. One former State Department official told me that this also included influencers inside Russia who have not even hit their 20s yet. These are people who have big followings on X, on Facebook, on VK, the Russian equivalent of Facebook. And Russia, of course, has a lot of laws that allow them to go after people when their identities are exposed, seizing property, imprisoning them, or, they could just fall out of a window like many who have come before. And I asked this person, do these young influencers understand the risk? Do they know what's happening right now? And this person actually teared up with me on the phone, and they said, many of these people believe in us, and they really believed that the US government was going to help them. And so even with the discourse around the GEC files, many of them almost don't believe it's possible because they don't believe that the US government could do something like that, would do something like that to people that they were helping. And it's not really our place to convince them otherwise. Another former official explained to me how some of the GEC staff were engaged in what were called exposure reports. They were essentially unveiling the covert operations of Russia's military intelligence services, the GRU, in places like Africa and Latin America, as well as what China's Ministry of State Security was pushing out in their own disinformation operations. This work included collaborating with the intelligence community, particularly the NSA, and it also included getting some of these foreign propaganda or disinformation outlets sanctioned, including RT, formerly Russia Today. So imagine if their names were exposed in some of these files coming out. I am also aware of the fact that some of the people who worked inside the GEC have now gone on to jobs inside the U.S. intelligence agencies, countering the very places that could now have access to their names. And I did reach out to the State Department to see whether or not they will redact these names. And as of now, I have not heard back. I did speak with somebody who is familiar with the State Department's FOIA process, who explained that typically anybody below the Deputy Assistant Secretary level, their name would be redacted, they would be protected. Anybody above that DAS level, well, their bios are already published online, they're public figures, so they wouldn't necessarily be redacted. Their names could be released. A former GEC staffer told me that they were not sure if anybody was left internally to advocate for this, that before the GEC was demolished, they were trying to show that they were team players. They emphasized the fact that they constantly had conversations about, what is this an American? If it's an American, we cannot touch it. We cannot go after it. But some people are now getting lawyers, and there is a spectrum of paranoia to bring it on vibes, I'm told. One of those employees, or former employees, I should say, said that Marco Rubio is essentially throwing red meat at the conservative base. It's very clear that what they are trying to do is create some document that will take everything out of context to prove that GEC was operating as some left-wing censorship operation. They may find a staff email here or there that references some lunatic online, and they'll try to make hay out of that. So, thank you for watching this report. If you appreciate the work I'm doing, please follow me, please support me, and thank you for subscribing to Human.